Okay, so let's get started. I have nearby my value study that I did, and just like in our value study, I'm going to do a light sketch on this final piece of paper. So I'm just going to very lightly sketch a trunk. I'm not going to stick with this exactly. And again, I'm not putting the trunk at the bottom of the page. I'm putting this in the middle, which goes against a lot of conventional composition ideas, but I think it is more of a graphic image than a realistic image of the tree. Although this will look quite beautiful. It will be recognized as a cherry blossom tree for sure. Okay, I'm just getting some very loose lines on here. And what I'm using right now is this reference image. This is the one where it had the shape of the tree that I liked so much. And as you can see, this cherry tree is wider than it is tall, or at least it appears that way visually. So I'm keeping that into consideration, taking that into consideration as I place these branches. Okay, I'm just gonna step here, and it gives me a sense where the tree is gonna go. I'm just lightly penciling in some of these leaves so as to, it might go off the page a little bit, that's okay. All right, that's all I'm gonna do for sketching. So let's get painting. I'm gonna start with my spray bottle. And in the areas where I have indicated to be the blossoms, not at the trunk, at the blossom area, I'm going to spray. And I'm not so close. I'm not so far behind. Just this is a medium-sized spray nozzle. It's going to be really hard to see in the video, but it's also really hard for me to see as well. Just a few sprays. If you want to see where you sprayed, water will show up shiny. When it's wet, it'll show up shiny. So you can move it around a little bit and see. But I'm going to have a little blind faith, and this is going to be very iterative as we go back and forth. I'm taking my round brush, and I'm going to make a little puddle of my rose madder, some freshly squeezed out rose madder. And I'm going to make a little puddle. This is really the only color we're going to use initially. So I have where I sprayed it, and with a pretty wet mix of rose madder, it's going to dab it off a little. I'm going to start putting in some of my blossoms. And as you see, what's happening when I add this wet paint onto the already wet surface, it's called wet on wet, it is just spreading. And it's doing something that I'm not controlling. And those fine little lines, that replicates the look of blossoms. So I'm just going to do this here and there. It does look quite dark pink, but as we know in watercolor, everything dries lighter, and there's so much water here because of the spray, and because the water I added to the paint, it is going to dry much lighter. And again, now I'm moving to reference this image where I'm having these pinks as my color inspiration. Now, something really important to remember when you are painting leaves or blossoms is you have to leave room for the birds. You have to leave space. We can't just fill this all in. And part of the reason I do this first before I do the branches is because the branches are much darker. And if I were to do the branches, it would be hard to get the blossom to be over the branches. It's hard to paint something light on top of something dark in watercolor. You can do that in opaque mediums like oils and acrylics, but it doesn't work in watercolor. So you'll notice as I'm going through here, when I get to a spot that does not have the spray, for example, this right here, I can do two things. I can go back in and spray on top, which will be nice because this is also drying. Even those initial sprays over here are already dry. So you can respray. Another thing you do is just rinse your brush off, and you can go in and sort of manually do the same, get the same effect. Just touch your brush to where there's a lot of paint and move it around. Rinse it. You don't want to keep adding color at this point. We're just moving it about, filling in. And there's nothing exact. We're not doing exactly those reference images that I had. I'm just, well, I didn't like that actually. I think I added too much water there. So taking a paper towel, I'm gonna just dab. And if you find that you've filled in too much and there's not enough room for the birds to fly through, This is a good, while it's still damp, take your paper towel and just touch it to it and it will lift out. This is, again, we're going to go back and forth on this. We're going to add, we can take away. At this early stage, when there's still a lot of wetness, it's very easy to lift out. Okay, I'm sensing that this area that I had sprayed earlier is dry, so I'm going to take my spray bottle again. And I'll show you what I do, what happens if I spray an area that's dry with paint on it. It will start to spread around. Another fun trick is to take your page and move it about, and it will fill in some of those areas. See how the color moves along? Wherever it's wet is where the color will go. So if you get an area that is too much darkness in one spot, you can do this. Again, I'm just remixing a little bit of rose madder as I use up the little puddle I have, remixing it. And keep adding in. I am sort of looking back at this and thinking, where am I going to put the branches? But I'm not keeping to my original drawing. That was just a spacing guideline. So I'm just going to keep going on this. Let's just keep adding. Oops, that's too much paint there. Again, leaving space for the birds to fly through and the branches to come through. At this stage, I can go over. I have a drawing of a big branch right here, and this is the place where I want to cross over the branches. And when we go back in and do the branches, you'll see I can add the dark branch above and below and leave the space for this here. All right, I'm going to give another spray over on this side and start moving over there. That has dried from my initial spray. Oops, too wet. Isn't this fun? It's like painting itself. I love this. It's almost like a magic trick waiting to see what's going to happen. You can control it somewhat, of course. But once you put that spray down, you're not quite sure where it's going to go. This is what I love about watercolor. Just don't ever know exactly what's going to happen. Those little happy accidents. Isn't that a Bob Ross thing? Happy little accidents. We're certainly doing a happy little tree, as he often said. When I was first learning to paint, I did not have an appreciation for Bob Ross. I sort of thought, oh, he's not even looking at anything. How can he be painting? Now, when I think about what he did and how he brought art to so many people and his calm demeanor, oh gosh, I just love him. I think I'm not the only one. All right, there's some harder edges in here that I don't necessarily like. This is just going to be a blob of blossoms. I don't want any real hard, sharp edges. That's where our branches are going to be. So I'm going to dab a little. And you can see already, this is all just one color, how light it has dried. So as watercolor dries, it does dry to much lighter. And that's why when I say it's iterative, I mean, you really do go back and forth, adding layers of paint. I'm just dabbing at some of those harder edges there. Okay. Do another spray down here, bottom left corner of our tree. Get some of these blossoms. And I am generally sticking to the shape I laid out for myself, which is that this is not a very vertical tree. It is more horizontal. And you see here, it's already gone off the edge of the page. I don't mind that. That doesn't bother me at all. If you don't like that, then you do your initial drawing to be smaller to fit on the page, but that doesn't bother me. I just sprayed on top there because I wasn't quite finding the spot where I had sprayed. And that is sort of a bit of a guessing game. Unless you have good lighting and you can see where it's shiny, that means there's water. Once you spray, you just have to sort of play around and try to find that spray. But I like that part a lot. Okay, I have a lot of the branches out and about, but I'm sorry, not branches, the blossoms. I do want to get some more down here in the middle. Let's try another little spray there. Not filling it in. We're not filling in everywhere. We're leaving air, leaving spaces. Okay, now I'm just going to use a damp brush and drag the color. I'm using the side of the brush to sort of pull it along. Let's see, how does that shape look? Well, we need to add some more up over here. And you can do that even with just a damp brush while this is still very wet. You can just drag it along and then move it about. Okay, let's show a better one here. Just with a damp brush, there's no color on there. But as I do that, the paint follows the wetness, so you can see it moving about and following the wetness. A few more spots. All right, the next thing we're going to do is add in some of the shadow. So this first that we've laid down is going to be the lightest part of the tree where the sun is hitting. And if you remember from our values study, the sun is coming from this direction, at least in this creation that I've made. So our shadows are going to be underneath and more on this side. I guess that applies more when we do the branches and the trunk. But so to darken this, I'm going to mix a little brown matter. That's going to be a nice warm dark in with the brown matter in with the rose matter to give me a warmer dark version of that. So I'm just making a warmer version of this. And then I'm going to make a cooler version. And the reason I'm doing the warmer and the cooler version is just to give some variety. Shadows, since the sunlight is coming from here, the sunlight is a warm light. The shadows are going to be cooler. So you can make a little purple. If you have purple, you can mix some purple with this rose matter. If you don't have purple, oh, that's very purpley. I mean, it's a little pinker. Okay. If you don't have purple, you can mix a little blue in with the rose matter, obviously to create your purple. I don't want to be too dramatic here. Okay. All right, so let's start with this cool shadow. Just gonna dab it here and there. Now it's nice this is still damp because it's still spreading nicely. If it were dry now, it would be tricky because these would not come in. These would come in as hard lines, and I don't want that. So I'm still using my little cool shadow mix. Okay, before this dries, go back in here. Just touching. That's starting to dry there. It's fine. You can respray it if you want, but that gets everything wet. So if you respray it, you may need to go back in and do some of the lighter parts too. Just lightly touching to break this up. Okay, a few more darks here. You can tell over here this is really faded out, which is okay, I don't mind that. It's less defined, the shape. If you want to add definition to it, this is an opportunity here with some of these, some of the darks. Just do a line of dark here. Okay, I'm gonna go into my warmer puddle, my warmer dark color puddle, and put that up towards the top, because if there were going to be any warmer bits, it would be towards the top here. It's just a variety in the shadow. You can even add it right on top of that cool shadow you did. Again, remembering that shadows usually are cool when they're in the opposite of a warm light, which obviously the sun is a warm light. Warm is in not as in temperature as in color. This shape looks a little strange to me, so I'm going to go, I don't know why that's looking a little strange to me. So I'm going to go easy on that warm dark, but it is nice to have some variety. Okay, this is a little blobby over here. Let's try to thin that out maybe. If you really want to get, this is an opportunity to use that Mr. Clean Eraser because it has some nice edges. So you can use this to pull out if you want to, if you're feeling a little clunky with the paper towel and you just want to pull out some edges, you can just dab with the Mr. Clean. This isn't the best use of it, but it is there for you to try. Okay, this looks quite dark compared to that light, but I do know that it's going to dry lighter, so I'm not too worried about it. It's just this shape is a little strange, so I'm going to take a damp brush, just move the shape about a little bit and try to emphasize some branches perhaps within this shape. Again, we're going to do the branches in a minute, but this will give the illusion that the blossoms are covering a branch. So, okay. All right, I'm happy with that. So I want this to dry completely before we do the trunk. The trunk won't matter, but once we get into the branches, we really want to separate that. We don't want to put in some dark brown right now and have it muddle up this, the pretty pinks that we have. So we'll take a break, let this dry, and we'll move on to the trunk and branches.